So we talked a little bit about setting up a document earlier in the semester, setting up our grids. This is from our chapter materials, chapter 3, assignment 3 technically, or why am I blanking? Document 3, whatever they want to call them. So they've already had their grids and their margins, etc. set up. So again, this might not be terribly exciting, but super important to InDesign. We're going to start talking about some more advanced features in preparing layouts, specifically master pages. So what we have here, and these are some samples, and also we can play around with these, or you guys can play around with these as well if you want to mess around with the exercises. But basically, you'll see this is one of the themes that the chapter, or that the book uses in general, this kind of touristy pamphlet, I guess, setup. So you see they've set up their layout, and then obviously this is a little bit different, but you can see it's got this basic, this is theoretically the publication that they're putting out. So it's got this basic touristy kind of, I guess, what you're going to be doing, right? And you'll see when we get into our more advanced features in InDesign, you'll see here in our page layout, I'm going to close all this here. Under our pages, and pages should be active or in your palette no matter what workspace you're in. So right now I'm just leaving it in typography because right now we're just concerned with working with pages and master pages. But it should be, no matter what, if you go to any of these workspaces, pages, and generally layers, but definitely pages should be one of your default tabs, because obviously it's publishing, so pages are by default part of everything that we're doing in InDesign. So we talked about navigating through a document. These are your pages that are actually laid out, and you can navigate through just by double clicking. One of the thumbnails will bring you to the exact page number, and then you used to be able to double click the number and it would bring you to the middle. You can move it over a little bit. But you see the difference here from the beginning of the semester when we opened up one of these was now we have master pages. So when we click on the A master, you'll see now we just have location, day, date, city. So basically what this is a template. It admittedly can get kind of confusing when you're working between pages and master pages. So you just need to pay attention when you're working with master pages and what you want to do. Whether you need to pay attention to whether you're in your master page or you're actually in your document pages, right? So basically a master page is essentially a template that you can set up within a document and then apply that template to your sets of pages. So if you look at, like one of the things in our next assignment, if you look at, again, existing publications, you'll see that they have a tendency, we talked about it a little bit with our, there we go. We talked about it a little bit with our, why am I blanking? Columns, our grid assignment, right? Where when you looked at different portions of the magazines, like different features, they all kind of follow like the same sort of structure. And you'll notice generally, as you look through each issue of a magazine, let's say Time, for example, Time will generally follow the same structure issue to issue, generally, because again, they can change everything and make what I say wrong. But generally, you'll have, your table of contents will look the same. You'll have, your masthead page will look the same. Your sometimes they'll have like a first feature, like, I don't know, like a magazine like Entertainment Weekly or something like that. After the contents might have like a 2-page spread that's like a hits of the week or something like that, whatever they call it, like a quick news and notes for the week, but it'll generally like follow the same structure, and like interviews will follow the same structure, et cetera, et cetera. So what they'll do is they'll set up master pages so that they'll have like a master page for feature one, and then a master page for an interview section, and a master page for some sort of other kind of article, things like that, so that you can just quickly apply these. And the way that we build them, and then once they're built, you can apply different things to them, and actually, so that way when you open your template, you'll see we have the master page here, and then all these pages follow generally that one master page. They've just flipped it here, but you see, for example, here's the master page for this setup. So they have location, potentially a solid color or image box, again, solid color or image box, text, image box, and then images, etc., etc. And then you can see as we go to the pages, they have it set up so that you can just drop in your content, right? That one makes a little bit more sense than this one that has blank stuff. When I'm jumping back and forth from here, so here's my pages, like here's the actual document page, page 2 and 3, and then here's the master page that it relied on. Obviously it looks pretty similar, except for location is generic. So basically you set up this template, and then you would apply it to these pages to fill your content. So what you want to do, where's my mouse is freaking out today. We've talked about in InDesign, text is positioned in text frames, graphics are positioned in graphic frames. We talked about that several times. Anything that you put, like for example here, anything that you put into a master page, whether it be a block of text or a potential image block, any kind of frame, any kind of shape, is called a master item because it's on the master page. So you're setting up master items. Let's see. By default, when you apply, sorry, this chapter goes over stuff that we've already talked about. That's why I'm sort of flipping through. Basically, when you apply anything to a master, or from a master page to a document, it's automatically locked, except for text. Shouldn't be locked. And so let's say, for example, we'll start up blank document. We have our blank pages here, right? This is a single page document, and we have our master page here, which defaults to your A master, and then you have your B master, C, D, E, for example. And you can rename these simply by, should be able to rename it by double clicking. Why is it not letting me double click? Sorry. Why is it not letting me change? We should be able to. Don't want to override that. Interesting. I'm not sure why it's not letting me rename. Anyway, so to create a master page, what you want to do is you're in your master page section of your pages tab, and you can hit new, just like any other document there, or you can hit new master, and it brings up more options here. Generally, for master pages, let me cancel and I'll go back. Generally, for master pages, I will often go to the drop-down menu, which for like 90% of the other stuff that I do in all these applications, I rarely do. But for this, I usually open up New Master because it brings up these options. So you can change the prefix if you want, which we'll get into specifics for our assignment. But instead of it by default labels it A through Z, if you wanted to change the prefix to a numbered system, you can. So we'll call this O1, and then you can change the name to, contents. And then you can also have these based on other master pages. I'm just going to hit none since we're starting from scratch here. And then now you see we have our O1, our contents, and then we'll create another master page. And then O2, and then change the name to feature, and then we'll keep this based on, actually I'm going to base this on the A master so that it's still this 3-column, let's say. And then for argument's sake, we'll do another new master. 03, I don't know, interview, let's say, and then we'll base this on none again. There we go. So now we have our 3 new master pages. So we have our contents page, and then our feature page, which is based on the A master, which is a 3-column master page, and then the interview, which is technically based on 0, so it's 2 columns. So in our contents, let's say, we're in our master pages, and I'm not going to go through like a crazy ton of this, but let's say, again, just like our grids assignment, let's say here we want a placeholder, and I just like to fill these just to have them filled. I have no idea what that banging is. So let's say this is our placeholder for our title for the page. We'll say table of contents. And then, so let's say we're going to have another one here. So here's going to be another text frame for our actual table of contents. Content. I didn't want to say the word twice, and then I'm going to option, shift copy, and let's say for argument's sake we want, give or take about halfway. I'm not going to worry about smart guides there. I'm going to copy this up to here. Make this a little smaller. So let's say we want this one to be an image. So I'll just make that green. So for my little arbitrary key here, we'll have all of our text is going to be cyan, all of our images are going to be green. So this is our template or our master page for our table of contents. Oh, let's also do this. Well, I guess for table of contents we don't need it. Never mind. So if you wanted to, I'm going to move these up just a touch. If you wanted to put text in, we'll make a small text box here. And for argument's sake, we'll call it like, title and issue number, whatever. And we will leave this. Let's go back to, we'll leave that 12 point, that's fine. I'll kind of leave that there just to sort of, there we go. Have that in the bottom corner, let's say. So this will be for our table of contents, right? And then what you can also do, so there's a couple little text formatting things that are very different. I know we've talked about it a little bit earlier, like with returns and soft returns. Spaces in publishing can be somewhat problematic. They're less of an issue now than they were. But let's say, for argument's sake, you wanted to put, more space in between this title and issue, right? So a lot of times we'll either hit like 5 spaces, or we'll hit, tab or something. What can end up happening is you can get some formatting issues when you export, or somebody else exports or imports, or rather opens your file. So a lot like soft returns and hard returns, where we're using the space after, right, to increase those spaces in between paragraphs. Instead of hitting return twice, you increase that space after. You have a ton of type options to help out with the formatting as well. We'll go over a couple of them, but special characters like symbols, page markers, hyphens, dashes, quotation marks, or other. What we're going to be concerned with here is inserting white space. This is where publishing gets kind of finicky. So you'll see here you have the two most common ones are M spaces and N spaces. This is going to be kind of like, I don't know if it's really punny or not, but basically an M space, and it's spelled EM for some reason, I don't know why. An M space is roughly the width of a lowercase m. I don't know why they just don't call it an M space and an N space, but without the E. And then an N space is roughly the width of a lowercase n, right? And then we have all these other different, like a hair space, obviously, is very small. A sixth space, it's hard to say. Thin space, quarter space, third space. A punctuation space, which is roughly the size of a period or comma. And then figure spaces based on other figures. So when we're inserting spaces, you want to have that either M space or N space in between, instead of hitting a bunch of space bars or even tabs, because when you're formatting the text formatting, again, can get kind of funky if you're opening up somebody else's document, and they don't have, for whatever reason, they have their preferences set up a different way. This way, these are different publishing cues that aren't going to change based on how your preferences are set up. And then let's say we want to have a hyphen or a dash. A lot of times we either throw the hyphen in there. Dashes can be tricky in publishing because dashes technically are longer than hyphens. So generally for publishing, we need to insert those as well. And so those are under special character and, oddly enough, hyphens or dashes. And again, we have an M dash or an N dash. So you can see that M dash is rather long. And then I'm just undoing just to show you guys. Under type and special character, hyphens and dashes. So we have our N dash. And you could put a space around them if you want to. A lot of times people do that. So putting one space, like bookending it with one space, generally isn't problematic. It's when you put a bunch of spaces together where things get problematic. It's the same thing with like code. It gets tricky with like when people want to do, and this is a goofy coder joke, but when they get into like doing dashes or tabs or spaces, and it was a big inside joke for those of you that watch Silicon Valley. It's kind of like the hyphenation is a sensitive subject. But some people prefer tabs because they're cleaner. Some people prefer spaces because you can hit 4 instead of, I think tabs are technically 5-ish, give or take. Anyway, but it can also format your code improperly and essentially break your code. So the same sort of thing goes with publishing. Again, bookending a hyphen or a dash with spaces is generally not problematic. It's, again, when you put a bunch of spaces together. So let's say we want our title and issue here, and then let's say on this section we're going to have, I don't know, contents, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do, oops, set that for our page number, just to sort of arbitrarily set that. And then what I'm going to do, I just clicked a bunch to open up my paragraph. I'm going to have that justified right. So here we essentially have our master page set up for our table of contents. Lastly, before we move on to setting up another one of these, a nice thing about InDesign is, and I always forget where it is off the top of my head, you can set up automatic page numbers, which is super nice. Basically what you do is on your master page, you set up, that's why I have that PG highlighted for, I'm going to hopefully make that a page number. I always end up doing it wrong the first time. So we're going to go under Insert Special Characters, and under Markers, we're going to have this be the current page number. And then it's going to default to 01 because it's master page 01. And that should remain active when we apply that to our actual pages. So if you're applying, for argument's sake, this master page to page 6, this will automatically default to page 6. And since this is a single page document that we have, like we don't have spreads, you can apply this to, let's say we had either a page to the left or the right. This was either the left or right facing page. You can apply that as well to the next page, and it will automatically change the page number as you go. Once we start applying it, hopefully it'll make sense. So we have our basic setup, right? So we're going to have our content here. We're going to have the title of the magazine. I just left it as blank for now. And then our active section and the page number, right? And then I'm just going to make another. So let's say this is our feature. So just to sort of quickly run through this. I don't know why I defaulted to that. We're going to have an image here. And then for argument's sake, we're going to have, in this feature, we're going to have another larger image here. And then we'll have some text. This is why I said this is not really exciting at all. So we'll roughly have that be about the size of the gutter there. Oops. Holding shift and copying.
Layered under the image. If you hadn't dragged that back up,
Uh-huh.
would it have mattered?
Um,
The text in the box would be under the image.
Yes and no. When you apply, so yeah, so how I had this, we'll sort of do this. So how I had that layered, yes and no. It depends. Does it matter if it's layered? Was the question. So it depends on what content you fill it with. So if you have an image here, and then you have your text here, we can see the outline. If we had the text set to wrap around the image, it would kick that text to the side, or if these are threaded, which we'll get into later, if these are threaded text, it will bump that text up to here. If you had, the text overlay the image for some reason, it wouldn't matter, no. Because you would have, like, this would essentially be, unless you had it filled with a color, this would be like a clear text box with whatever color text, like black text over like a light image. So you would just have text running over your image. And those are all like design choices that, and again, these can, once you apply these to your pages, you can modify them as well. So you're not like dead stuck on like, well, that's my template, I have to use it. You can tweak as needed. But yeah, I just kind of like arbitrarily decided to do this kind of goofy 3-column thing. So let's move these up just a touch. I know these aren't going to be the exact same size, but just so we have, I'm going to grab this. Oops. I hit Command instead of Shift. So I just shift selected both of these, and I'm going to copy. Nope. I don't want a new document. I'm going to go to my feature page, and I'm going to do a paste in place, which will paste it on the same spot on our page, right? So we'll do a paste in place, and you'll see in our bottom right here that our contents, well, this isn't the contents, but our page number has changed, right? Because we're on page 2. So it automatically changed. So I don't have to go in and retype that number. So let's say, for argument's sake here, so we'll have feature, and then this will stay the same. Did I see, was there a question coming? Did I see? Yep.
Yes. Okay. So if you take that green
Mm-hmm.
and it went down over top of it, like let's say that's not in the margin, that's like on it. Let's say you have a page where the whole thing is like an image or something.
Yep.
How do you get that page number to
Mm-hmm.
be on top?
So to
That's a
have,
question for
yep.
later.
No,
Is
it's
that
fine.
for-
Nope,
okay.
that's a good question. So if you have an image, or rather a page that's just a full image,
Right.
generally,
Color or whatever.
yep, or a color, yeah. Generally, well, if it's an image, 9 times out of 10, give or take, 9 times out of 10, they don't have that information. If it's a full bleed, full edge-to-edge image, a lot of times they won't put anything over top of the image, because if you're filling a whole page with an image, then generally that image is pretty important, so you don't want
Okay.
stuff on top of that image. So a lot of times they'll just leave that out. So next time you're flipping through a magazine and you see like a full page image, they'll just kind of skip that information, and you just kind of automatically infer like, oh, that's page 3, this is page 4. That's, because like again, when you're filling a whole page with an image, it's usually fairly important, so they don't want to clutter that image up with other
What
stuff.
if it's just like a color?
If it's a solid color, that's a little bit different.
Okay.
But that's all just in the arrangement. So if it's a solid color, let's say, like for argument's sake, let's say that this fills up our entire page. It's behind, since I pasted this last, or this is the last thing that I did, it automatically arranges so it's in front. So this is just your basic arrangement stuff that goes from pretty much any application. So like, for argument's sake, let's say that was object arrange. Let's say that was in the back.
Okay.
So you had your solid color across the whole thing, and then you realize it's covering up your page number. You just take this solid color, and you just make sure that when you arrange, that you just send that to the back, and then your page number is just on top of it. That's all. So that's just in the simple arrangement. They'll do that a lot with colors. So if you have a solid color, or even a relatively transparent color, if it's anything other than image that fills up a whole page, usually you'll have, more often than not, you'll have your information will still be at the bottom of the page, or wherever they put the information. Sometimes some funkier magazines put it on the side or whatever. But if it's a full, usually with images, if it's a full image, more often than not, they don't have any other information. Because again, they just don't want to clutter that image. So we'll leave that there. So this is our feature. Why am I blanking? Our feature master page. I don't know why I was blanking there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to fill this. I'm going to, sorry. I wanted to make sure, so for text, sorry, I want to make sure that these are actually frames rather than, just to make sure that these are frames rather than shapes. With images, this is where InDesign can get kind of finicky. With images, frames don't necessarily matter. Frames or shapes can be used to hold graphics. With text, usually text to play is nicer with frames. That's why you would use a frame over a shape. Generally, you kind of, as a general rule, you kind of want to use frames rather than shapes. But again, for like something like graphics or images, using your shapes tool is fine. For text, generally you want to use your your frame options, because then you can fill those easier with text. Okay, so I'm saving. Oh, it's gonna make me save to. All right. Let's save this to the desktop just to save it. All right. So let's say, for argument's sake, we have a whole bunch of master pages done, right? So I don't have to bore you guys too much with this. So you have your table of contents set up. You have your feature. You have your interviews. You have your blah, 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 blah. You have everything set up. So you're going to apply these to your master page, or to your, rather, you apply these master pages to your actual pages. So page 1 in this document, let's say that that's something else. We're going to skip it. So we're going to go to page 2, and I'm just double clicking. We're active on this. I know it doesn't look any different because the grids and everything are the same. But you can tell that we're active on page 2 because this is highlighted. So this is kind of where, and I do it all the time still, this is kind of where you have to pay attention to whether you're on your document pages or your master pages, whichever one is highlighted. Like even if it's blank, let's go back to the A master. So the A master page versus page 2 doesn't look any different, right? But this is highlighted, so obviously that's what's active. Bless you. So let's go back to page 2 in our document. So we want to apply, let's say, our contents to page 2. So a couple different ways you can do it. You can right click and you can apply master to pages. You can also do this, right clicking brings up the same menu. So you can hit this little contextual menu here and you can apply master to pages. And then what that does is that brings up this little menu here, and you get to choose which page you apply. So let's do our contents, and then we're going to apply that to page 2. And you can do it to all pages, or you can select a range if you wanted to do a range of pages, et cetera, et cetera. So for right now, we're just going to do page 2. So let's hit OK. And now we have our master page applied to our document page. Now by default, everything is kind of locked when we apply our master pages to our pages. And this is just, I find it generally kind of a pain, but this is basically just so, like, when you're designing, or when a publication is designing these master pages, like, obviously they're designing them for a reason. They want their templates to be roughly the same throughout their whole publication. So it's really set up so that you don't accidentally move anything, you don't accidentally change anything, things like that. Generally, we should be able to, no, it's not going to let us. For some type, it allows you to actually type into a master page. We'll get to that in a second. So let's go to our page 3. And another way you can apply a master page is, let's say we want to grab our feature page. You can actually drag and drop it as well. Some people find that handier. Others don't. And actually, let's do, sorry, I'm going to undo. I'm going to go to page 4 to make sure that this works. So I'm going to grab the feature page, and I'm going to apply it to page 4. Yep. And you can see it automatically changed that page number for us, which is nice. I just wanted to make sure I was putting master page 3 on whatever. So you see we have our feature, and it changed the page number for us, and then all of this content is locked. So what you can do, a couple different things you can do is, when you're ready to start placing content into your pages, you can override all master page items, and then that allows you to be able to move everything around and or place text into, place images, place text, et cetera, into your document. You can also, right, I just undid that. Okay, so I just undid, if that's a word. You can, I always forget, there we go. You can Shift Command click if you wanted to do one thing, for example. Like let's say we wanted to change this for whatever reason. So if you Shift Command click, you can see it kind of overrides that. And now you can change that to, let's say, table of contents instead, right? Did I spell that right? I was worried that I spell terribly and I type awfully, so I was worried that in my demos I spell stuff wrong. And then what you can do is you can also, I forget where it is, it's buried somewhere in here. I'll go into it. I generally tend not to worry about it. But once if you've overridden a bunch of stuff, you can actually remove all overrides on a page so that they go back to being locked. So anything that was a master item will go back to being a master item. To be honest, I generally don't do it. Like once I've sort of finished laying things out, and if I've overridden that master page thing, I generally just kind of leave it as a regular item. So this allows you to place, again, you can override everything on a page, or if you Shift Command click, it will allow you to select. So now you can see that's the only thing that's selectable. And then it'll allow you to place, which we'll get into in the next section, next chapter, it'll allow you to place images. There we go. It'll allow you to place images or place text. A nice thing about placing text when you have, go back to here, when you have 2 columns or 3 columns, when you place text, you can actually place them into the 3 columns. You don't have to do it like individually, and it sort of automatically does the page flow or the column flow, which is nice. Anyway, so doing that, either overriding all master page items, or Shift Command click. Let's say you wanted to make that your title and you type table of contents over it, or even just get rid of it and then type, whatever, contents, and then you can do all of your sort of designing from there, right? You could even, I didn't even have to delete that one. You could even go into your text frame and then make that I'll do all your fun formatting and stuff. And then we'll get into more specific formatting later, formatting your frame versus formatting your text color. But we'll get into that more advanced things later. So that overriding the master items will allow you to edit them individually. So that's the basics. I know that was kind of a lot-ish, but that's the basics of setting up a master page, and then applying them to pages. Again, a lot of people prefer that drag and drop. When you get into 2 different pages, when you get into spreads, it gets a little bit trickier. It'll highlight, like as we're sort of dragging and dropping. See how it kind of highlights there, and if you apply it to, if you had a facing spread, if you drop it down to the number, you'll see both of the pages sort of highlight. This is one of the few times where I actually prefer to use the drop down to apply. So I'll go to whatever page I'm on, let's say page 3, for example. I actually, for whatever reason, I actually like to do the apply to master, and I get this menu. I don't know why. I just prefer that over dragging and dropping. It's like one of the few times I prefer going to the contextual menu. Any questions? I thought I saw a question up. Yeah.
When you're in your master pages,
Mm-hmm.
you bring that up on
Mm-hmm.
the pages. These pages that go underneath the master, do they automatically come up?
These pages here?
Yeah.
No. This was just already set up. So your document, so you would set up your document, and you can set up your master pages first, and then you would set up your document for however many pages, like for, I forget exactly what it is, but for the assignment, we're going to be creating like a 36-page document or whatever it is. So you would set that up first, so then you would have all of your pages here, which are essentially blank, and then you would apply your master pages to them. So that's gonna end up like here when you were creating a new document. I just did Command N. So when you're creating your document, you have like 16 pages, and either facing pages or not, what the start page is. We'll tab through start page 2. So now we have our spreads, and then I'll hit OK. So now you'll see there's no master pages because we haven't created them, but then there's your there's your document pages. So you're going to create those document pages whenever you open a new document, and those are all going to be predetermined if you're, if you have a 4-page pamphlet versus a 162-page magazine arbitrarily. So that's all when we set up our document. And then you would create your master pages and then apply them to. The good thing about, let's go back to here, and let's say I'm going to undo a bunch. There we go. So that this is no longer selectable. So these went back to master items, right? The good thing, now watch it not work, is when you go back to your master pages, so we're on our master page because it's highlighted, right? Let's say for whatever reason you decide, oops, helps if I hold down shift. Let's say for whatever reason you decide to swap these on your master page, right? Any page that this is applied to will automatically reflect those changes, so long as they're still master items. So it's kind of similar to our paragraph and our character formatting. When you change that character or paragraph style, it automatically reflects that, and you're fine. It automatically reflects that within your document, so you don't have to go changing everything. So that can be super, super handy. You just have to remember that if you don't want any items on your page to change, like let's say we made changes, yeah, I mean, I guess you could just you could override those master items and swap them around. And like if we were to do, so we're on our page here. Let's just quickly apply this one to here. So we'll go into page 3, and then I'm going to override all of these. And let's say for argument's sake we want to, I should have grabbed these by themselves, or together rather. So let's say for argument's sake we want these to be like this. And since these are no longer master items now, if we go back to our master page for our contents page rather, and let's say we move this back up, you'll kind of see it reflected in our, let's try this, in our thumbnail. You see it's kind of reflected in our thumbnail, the changes that I'm making there. So I'll drop this down to here.
So it doesn't affect the other ones that you were on that page.
Exactly. So it doesn't affect, right. So it didn't affect page 3 because I overrode those master items, right? So since these are no longer master items, changing this master page doesn't affect these items. It only affects the ones that are still master items, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you deleted the link.
Correct. Yeah, they're essentially linked. So yeah, you basically broke that link between master item and master page. So any changes that you make on your master page will not be reflected on this page. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay. Now, the automatic page numbers, what if
Uh-huh.
you have a spread and you want the automatic page numbers to
Mhm.
go? Is that the same thing?
Absolutely. Yep. So if you have a spread and you're setting up your page numbers, so let's say here,
Okay.
I'm not going to do it in a master page because I'm just going to show you. So I'm just going to grab a text, make a quick text box
So you
here.
don't have to do it on a master page.
No, you don't.
Okay.
It helps to make it on a master page because then when you apply it,
Right.
but yeah, but no, you don't have to. So I'm just sort of arbitrarily making this big. Oh, too big. There we go. So I'm going to select our text here, and I'm going to go under Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, and then Current Page Number. So it automatically reflects it's page 2. And then if I Option drag anywhere really on the page, it doesn't really matter, it automatically changes it to page 3. And that's where it's different than spread. So a spread is the difference between pages. So a spread is made up of 2 or more sometimes
Okay.
pages, right? So sometimes, rarely in publications, obviously, do we have more than two, but sometimes like an odd brochure or an odd like pamphlet will have like a middle page, or even like do an accordion fold, or what is it called, a gatefold. So you have four. So you have like you open it up like a book, and then that 2 pages open up 2 more to the outside, so you have 4 in a row. So you would have that spread would be made up of those 4 pages. So a spread is basically any combination of 2 or more pages that sit next to each other. So again, if we had like if we had a gatefold 4-page spread here, it would go from left to right, obviously, but we could have page, whatever you started with, but page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, you know. So once you set up those automatic numbering, and that goes through the entire document too. So if you move this, even if you just move it, it automatically changes to page 5.
So there's something applied to that square.
Correct. It's the character. Yep. So it's
the character. Or
it's
is
the
it
character
frame?
itself, because you've inserted. No, it's not the frame. It's the character itself, because you've applied it. You've applied a special character.
Okay.
So essentially, what that is
it's
you.
something that's applied to that.
Yes.
That tells it to do.
Yep. It's basically like
Okay.
it's basically like coding.
Okay.
Like you essentially set up a code that tells this character, whichever page number it is, to reflect that current page number.
Okay.
And again, that doesn't have to be on master pages, obviously.